Howdy, everybody. My name is Nicholas Maitrey. My major person presentation was on Harry Harlow, American psychologist. He had a plethora of awards and accolades, several dozen published papers from what I've seen, and thousands, if not tens of thousands, of citations on the papers that he's written. Very well established career in the psychology field. Um, he's probably most well known for his nature versus nurture research, which was the cloth versus wire mother. I'm sure many of you have heard about or read about throughout, if this is your first class or multiple classes, as we're all pursuing bachelor's, I'm assuming. And just some background information behind this one is that the monkeys and humans have similar developmental stages. So that's why they chose the rhesus monkeys. One good thing about this was that it had a lower mortality rate for the monkeys if they were raised in a lab when compared to being raised in nature by their mother. So they were surviving more often with us than without us. And in total for this research, he had 8 monkeys. 4 were fed with the cloth mother, 4 were fed with the wire mother. And so some of the outcomes, we ended up finding that both cloth and wire, whether the milk was coming from either or, were physiologically equivalent to each other. Both groups drank the same amount of milk and weighed about the same. And the big thing was that psychologically, it was a huge difference. Both groups clung to the cloth mother, whether it was providing the milk or not. The ones whose milk came from the wire mother, they spent no more time than necessary clinging to the wire mother just to get that milk, and then they were out of there. One interesting thing about it is that the floor was actually heated. So brand new newborn baby monkey has a hot floor to lay on, right? But almost immediately, as soon as it found the cloth mother, it did not want to leave more than necessary. This research ended up giving us a paradigm shift of where newborn affection comes from, that it is a psychological dependence and not a physiological dependence. It is not the milk or the food or the needs provided that make us love our mothers or parents. It is the warmth and the affection, the psychological benefits that come from the parents that babies have the affection towards. Another experiment research that Harlow did was total social isolation in monkeys. He did this to imagine the effects of total social isolation in humans. Before this, some previous research was the partial social isolation in monkeys. This was where they were taken away from their mothers, but they were still allowed to interact with each other. The reason he picked monkeys and not humans for this, newsflash, is that it is more complex. There's a plethora of variables, and it's quote-unquote impossible to study babies in social isolation, especially when we'll find out later the time frames that these were done. So this prior research took about 10 years. What ended up happening was these monkeys had the inability to socially interact. They were detached from their environment and overall hostile towards not just themselves but others. And this went on through their entire life, pre-adolescence, adolescence, and adulthood. Going into the total isolation, so the room was soundproofed as well as they could have. There were loud noises in the laboratory itself, which would frighten the monkeys, so that's an uncontrolled variable that may or may not have altered the experiment. I would assume not, but that is something that did happen. It was noted in the papers. They took time spans of 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months of total isolation, and then they followed them for 2 years post-observation to learn the effects of what happened. They were studying the social interaction and behavioral interaction between these monkeys and a control group of monkeys who were brought up like normal. These monkeys had a living area, right? General cage. It was closed off, though they couldn't see outside. And then for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, they would get access to a playroom, which kind of sounds very similar to like prison recess to me. Not that I've ever been to prison. It's just I've seen some TV shows where they're like, oh, we only get 30 minutes a day out here in the sunlight. So that's spoiler alert, his work has been called unethical, and I'm going to leave that for you to decide at the end. So post-observations, immediately as soon as they are taken out of their isolated cage and put into a group with others, there is an emotional shock that happens. They tend to clutch and rock. They called it an autistic self-clutching pattern. And there was one monkey within the 3-month group that ended up stopping eating and died. There was another monkey that was giving the same patterns. They stopped eating as well, but they interacted before it could die and force fed it, so it ended up surviving. And in the notes it sounded like he was kind of upset he had to interact with this monkey, but he did save one. The 6 and 12-month-old groups were fine as far as the food ordeal went. They never stopped eating, but we did lose one along the way. So comparing the 3 versus 6 month, I think is pretty the most difference you'll find in the groups. What's interesting with 3 months is they found it to be reversible, quote unquote, as far as we can tell. Harlow stated that it was with the behavioral play that I'll talk about later, and its interaction, social, that it seemed to recuperate, maybe not as well as a natural monkey would, but well enough for it to be considered normal. And so this 3 months, he compared that to being a 1-year-old human orphan, being left alone for a year as a baby and then going back into society. Later research from another psychologist would find a 1-to-3 ratio of monkey age to human age. So if it's a 3 month, that's more like a 9-month-old baby of social isolation. Now 6 months is where the damage really starts more dramatically. They found impaired socialization, specifically in contact play. They refused to play with the controlled monkeys who were in their natural habitat the entire time. They would only contact play with isolation. I personally know from just other psychology classes, contact play is very beneficial in development as like socially for even humans as well. And these 6-month-olds had non-existent social interaction besides aggressiveness with the controlled natural element monkeys. So that was not good. Now the 12 months absolutely were destroyed. They did not play. They ended up having to get removed out of the general communal area after about 10 weeks. because they were helpless against the control monkeys who wanted to contact play. And once they found out the other monkeys wouldn't react or do anything, they got more and more aggressive towards these 12-month monkeys, which is the equivalent of a 3-year-old being isolated for its entire life and then being thrown into, what's that, pre-K almost, something. And I mean, this was just a fragment of what Harry Harlow brought to psychology. Like I said, a plethora of awards and accolades, dozens and dozens of papers, not to mention all of the citations you can find from other psychologists who have quoted his research. And I mean, it could be viewed as unethical. He's damaged a few monkeys for the research that we've piggybacked off of ever since. So, was it worth it? What do you think? Let me know. Thank you.